Velo voices, many voices, one passion. Pro cycling, for fans, by fans.
Hello and welcome to episode 14 of the Velo Voices podcast. We are a week into the Tour de France. And Kathi, we can get started as soon as you move the bus away from your microphone. Oh my gosh.
I'm delirious.
Yeah, and Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
It's been an interesting and unpredictable week at the Tour, and it's been an interesting and unpredictable week for the Velo Voices. So who knows what this podcast is going to be like tonight, but we have kind of a big agenda planned here. We're going to review stages 1 through 9. Obviously, 9 ended today. We're going to discuss our favorite moments and some of the things that have surprised us. We're going to talk about all of our tour picks, the people we set out to watch, and we'll, of course, give them a grade like we did with our Giro picks. We're then going to let Kathi gloat about whipping our butts in fantasy cycling.
Which I don't know how that's happening. Let me just say that.
And then we'll cover a little bit about what's going to be happening next week. And then Kathi and I will tell you a little bit about our Tour de France plans. So with that, let's talk about what's happened so far in the Tour de France. I have to admit, I can't believe how unpredictable the Tour has been. So Tim, why don't you start us out with stage 1 and tell us what happened?
Stage 1, as if anyone needs reminding about what happened on that. It was a flat stage. It was set up specifically, really, to put a sprinter into the yellow jersey. In terms of a star rating, normally we don't give sprint stages that high a rating, but for a variety of good and bad reasons, I think this one has to be a 4 out of 5. So what happened? It was all shaping up for a routine bunch sprint when the Orica-GreenEdge team bus somehow managed to get itself wedged under the finish line gantry. And I think we've all seen the images of that with the driver with his head in his hands. So the finish got moved back to the 3 kilometre mark, and then eventually it got restored back to the original finish. But in the confusion, we had a major crash that eliminated Cavendish, Sagan and Greipel from contention. And in a reduced bunch sprint, Marcel Kittel took the victory and the first yellow jersey.
So, Tim, I heard somebody on Twitter call the bus the Orica-Greenwedge.
And that was about right, wasn't it? Because, man, it got stuck.
So these guys are like 10 kilometers out, and there's panic, right, at the finish line. What are we going to do? How are we going to get this bus out of here? And so they decide that they're going to move the finish line to the 3-kilometer mark because they have a camera at the 3K mark, right, for people. If you crash inside the 3K mark, then you get the same time. So they know with this camera what guys have crossed over the 3K mark before any crashes happen. So logically, that's the best place to have to move the finish. Except the parcours have had a sharp curve in the road right at the 3-kilometer mark.
Yeah, it was the edge of a roundabout, wasn't it? Or should I say traffic circle?
So there was really no way that the finish could be at the 3K mark. And then they finally, I don't even know how many kilometers the guy's at. They get the bus moved, and they radio out to everybody that, never mind, we're going to move the finish back to the original finish line, and all hell breaks loose in the peloton, right? Because we've had riders already, using their teams up to get to the 3K mark. So, Tim, was it the right thing to do to move the finish line in the first place? I mean, what were the race organizers supposed to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think while the green wedge was in the position it was in, I think there was no choice. They obviously couldn't finish on the finish line as it was. Logistically, it made sense to move it back to the 3K mark for all the reasons you said, but at the same time, it was right on top of the corner of a roundabout, so it would have been carnage, I think, if they'd finished there. Yeah, and equally, I can understand the reasons for moving it back. I think you've got thousands of fans waiting on the finish line, looking for the finish of the first stage of the Tour de France. And the amount of pressure that the organisers were under to make both those decisions, I think, ultimately, I know people like Mark Madio came out and criticised the decision to restore the finish, but it was a tough call to make either way. I don't envy the choice that the organisers had to make in quite a high pressure situation at such short notice.
Yeah, that's really a tough decision they had to make. So Kathi, there was a lot of communication that had to happen between the race organizers, the directors in cars, and riders on the road to let guys know where the finish was going to be. At the end, Marcel Kittel never even realized that the finish had been moved to the 3K mark. At least that's what he said. So, does this whole incident support the case for race radios or not?
I think you could argue it both ways, really, because some guys had their radios in their ears, some of them didn't. They didn't seem to be able to tell everybody. The guys that did know didn't seem to be able to get the message across to the guys that didn't. And I think Kittel also said that he had no idea that there was a major crash.
Right.
So, I don't think either way it would have. I don't think it's a good example of whether race radio should be in or not, because you could argue it both ways, really.
I kind of felt like it was, and not necessarily that you needed a race radio for the team directors to give commands to riders, but the riders need some way of knowing, whether maybe it's a radio that only the race organizers have access to let riders know if something extremely dangerous is going to happen. Can you imagine if they approached the finish line
and saw a big old bus?
and nobody had been able to really communicate. I mean, a single motorcycle can slow the group down, and really they could have stopped the race right before the finish line and neutralized the whole thing. But I don't think anybody wanted to see that.
Anybody wanted that. But I mean, what do they do in the? Because the under 23s or the amateurs don't have radios, do they? So I mean, how do they do that?
Well, in my races, in amateur racing, when there's danger, they'll just neutralize the race. They'll just literally stop it.
Right.
So that's what they do. So anyway, really interesting day. Okay, so what the race organizers decide to do then, because it was so chaotic and because there were so many crashes, they decide to basically give everybody the same time at the finish. And afterwards, Cavendish was kind of like, well, if you're giving everybody the same time on GC, shouldn't we also have maybe eliminated the finish line green jersey points? So, Tim, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I'm in two minds about it. I think to an extent he has a point. But equally, I think there's also a case of where do you draw the line? Because crashes on sprint stages are fairly common. And you can't neutralise the points on each of those. So I think it's just one of those things that's part and parcel of racing. There was a big crash. How much it was influenced by the move of the finish is arguable. So I think they probably did the right thing allowing the green jersey points to stand, to be honest.
Yeah. So, Kathy, how excited were you to see Kittel in yellow?
Oh, now. Because, of course, Cancellara is the sacred haunches, and he is above all, at all times. I've got to say, Kittel is the divine haunches. So, we're just waiting for the other part of the trilogy here. He looked great. God, he's just striding like some sort of Argonaut god in those. It was fantastic.
Well, he's definitely hair doping. Anyway, okay, let's move
he
on.
Looks so much like Vanilla Ice.
Tweets of the week was brilliant that way, by the way. All right, let's move on to stage 2. Man, we talked a lot about stage 1, but you had to. I mean, that bus situation was unprecedented. So, Kathy, give us a rundown of stage 2.
Right. Well, this was a medium mountain stage, which was you don't have medium mountain stages in stage 2 of the Tour de France, but they did, and I'm giving it a star rating of 4 out of 5. Because it basically blew the peloton apart. Marcel Kittel got dropped in his beautiful all-yellow kit quite early on, and there was not going to be any sort of sprinting being done. And Cannondale tried to put Sagan up for the win because everybody sort of said this would be Sagan's stage because he could get over the mountains and in pretty good shape. And even Chris Froome had a little bit of an attack on the descent to the final climb, which he sort of said he just wanted to make sure that he was safe down because it was quite technical. But obviously this was a taste of what was to come. And then there was a breakaway with Sylvain Chavanel, my favorite name to say, and a couple other guys, including a Radio Shack rider who was Jan Bekelants. And God, I love this story. Apparently, his roommate is Jens Voigt. And he said that when Chavanel sort of took his foot off the gas, Bekelants thought, well, what am I going to do? Because I might get caught. And he said, I just remembered what Jens would do. He would pedal hard and he wouldn't look back. And so he did. And he won the stage by just just a second or something, and it was absolutely fantastic. And he looked so thrilled and just so happy to win, and it was his first professional win in his first Tour de France. And as he said, as far as they were concerned, that was it. Their tour was going to be great. They didn't even need to do anything else. But so it was a really good stage. I really liked that. It was, again, a big surprise. Yeah,
and Jan Bakelants, I mean, if you've been watching him ride ever since then, he's on fire.
Oh,
he's been in breaks.
He's all over
everywhere.
The place.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, Tim, who could have predicted this? Did you put Jan Bakelants on your fantasy team?
if only I had. No, it was fantastic, wasn't it? I think the only shame was that Chavanel couldn't win on what was his 34th birthday. But you live for finishes like this where you've got the lone escapee who's desperately trying to hold the peloton at bay and just manages it on the line. I mean, like Kathi said, it was 1 second at the end of it.
Yeah.
And his reaction afterwards, he's such a lovely guy. He's a strong team rider. He's always played the domestique role for his teams. His 5th year as a pro, and what a way to get your first professional win.
Yeah, I mean, the look on his face when he crossed the line was just so priceless. I love that. He was just so surprised, and it was just like the best day of his life. So that was a brilliant stage. All right, stage 3 then was our last stage on Corsica. And I have to say, from looking at the footage of Corsica, I've got to plan a trip there. That place looks amazeballs. So it's just so beautiful. Anyway, so this is the last stage on Corsica from Ajaccio to Calvi, and this is the one that we described as lumpy as anything. And I have to give this a star rating of 3 out of 5. So what happened was Louis Westra and Simon Clark tried to get them mountain points, but Pierre Roland attacked 2K from the summit on the final Cat 2 Morcellino to keep his polka dots. And I got to admit, I love the full polka dot jersey with the shorts.
So wrong. There's too many dots or something. He looks like he's got the pox.
Yeah, somebody called it the pock kit or something like that, but the chicken pox kit.
I did.
Anyway, on the descent, we had Sylvain Chavanel again attack with Nieve and Nordhaug, but they get caught, and so it's really down to a group sprint. And of course, all the other sprinters got dropped on the climb except for Sagan, so we were all sure that it was a day for Peter Sagan to win. So it comes down to a bunch sprint, and Sagan's going to win, but he didn't. Simon Gerrans beats him at the line with a bike throw to take the yellow jersey. So, Tim, how shocked were you to see Gerrans essentially out-sprint Peter Sagan?
A little, but not that much. I think Gerrans is a rider who excels on this kind of stage. He's and as we subsequently discovered, he'd spent some time scouting out the parkour for the stage, so he knew exactly what to expect. It was one that he targeted. Sadly, I'd been expecting Orica-GreenEdge to do something on this stage, but I put my money on the wrong guy. I was betting on Michael Albacini. But yeah, terrific to see Gerrans win. Yeah,
and after Busgate, I was kind of excited to see kind of a turnaround for this team, where they've been in yellow, predominantly for the first part of the week. So I thought another rider that really shined was Michael Kwiatkowski from Quick-Step. He finished 4th to maintain the white jersey. And how about the way this guy's riding so far, Tim?
I mean, he's been brilliant. I mean, he'll be mentioned in dispatches, I think, in some of the other stages as well. So, I mean, in 9 stages so far, he's finished in the top 4 times, including today, in fact. He's a guy who's almost come out... I hesitate to say he's come out of nowhere, but certainly he's had a relatively low profile until this season. And I think he was being taken along by Quick-Step for experience here, but he's proven to be a much more adept climber in this kind of company than perhaps even he himself was expecting. He's also a good time trialer.
Yeah.
And as we've seen, he's got a fairly decent sprint on him.
Yeah, well, it didn't stop for Orica-GreenEdge on stage 3. It kind of continued into stage 4, which was a complete surprise. So, Tim, why don't you tell us what happened in the team time trial?
Yeah, so this was it was 25k, the team time trial around Nice, finishing on the Promenade des Anglais. I'll give it a 2 out of 5 because team time trials, I think by their nature, aren't necessarily that exciting. But as they go, this was actually a pretty good one. We had OPQS with the banged up Tony Martin taking some enormous turns on the front, setting a benchmark time which Garmin and Sky were both unable to beat. But 3 days after Orica-GreenEdge had parked their bus on the finish line, this time it was their train that grabbed the headlines, as they took the win by a pretty slim margin, 0.75 seconds, and that was enough to put Germans into yellow.
Yeah, people ask me if I was surprised by Orica-GreenEdge. Absolutely. I was really surprised that they put down a time that beat Quick-Step and that beat Sky. They have great T-tiers like Sven Tuft and Cameron Meyer and Daryl Impey. They're all national champions. But, I thought Quick-Step had set such a fast time that I thought nobody was going to beat them. So kudos to those guys. Now, something happened on this stage that was interesting, especially with the Cannondale team, where an injured Ted King went down the start ramp on his normal road bike modified with a disc wheel and clip-on aero bars. Because of his injury, he wasn't able to ride his time trial bike, and immediately he was dropped basically from his team's train and was left to basically do a solo time trial to the finish, where he came across the line supposedly 7 seconds later than basically the time cut would allow. So Kathi, there was uproar on Twitter about this. What's your thoughts on Ted and whether or not he should be able to, should have been able to stay in the tour, or if the organizers made the right choice?
Well, I think the biggest question, and this is where for me the unfairness comes into it, is that there was a question as to whether they had actually timed him correctly, because apparently, I don't know, something about transponders or something, but there was a huge question as to whether, the time that they had given him was right, because he'd sort of said, I'd come in at such and such time. I think I've made the cut. And then they came back and had a different time. And that was never explained or looked into as far as I could gather. I don't know, who knows what goes on behind closed doors. The fact that, he was 7 seconds and he was, riding injured and all that. I thought that was, they could cut people some slack, but then again, you could always say rules are rules. But I think the fact that there was a big question mark over his time, they should have given him leeway and let him ride. The question was, would he have been able to do anything? Because, he's got a separated shoulder, for heaven's sake. So I think that they didn't do themselves any favors by what they did. And he's such a lovely guy. And although that shouldn't matter, I don't think. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's his first tour.
Today is going to be #winging it for this podcast.
It's his first Tour de France, so it was heartbreaking for him to have to go home this way. He didn't have the transponder on his bike, but I'm not sure that was necessarily the race organizer's fault or his team's fault for failing to move it from his time trial bike to his road bike. But what I thought was interesting is they didn't have any footage of him crossing the line. The clock's right above the finish line. I would have thought that somebody would have captured that on camera, and then it would have been really easy to tell, what his time was. So, obviously American fans were gutted by this because, Ted is, he's very kind to fans. He's classy. He's a very strong rider. And it was kind of the race organizers' difficulties in stage one that kind of caused his injury in the first place, I would say, with the whole movings of the finish line and the whole bus incident. So I think that's what made it hard for people to swallow. All right. So that took us then to stage 5. And so, Kathi, why don't you tell us about what happened there?
That's a good question. Well, it was going to be a group sprint into Marseille. It was lumpy. It had a few climbs. Everybody was wondering, because Cavendish had bronchitis during the week, which is possibly why he hadn't won a stage so far. However, GreenEdge were on the front for most of the day, just defending yellow. About 32 kilometers to go. The Argonauts and Lotto got on the front and really started to drill it. We had a bit of a crash, which included Marcel Catal around that time. And then by the time they went into the Flamme Rouge, the farmers had their train and it was just moving down the track. Cav comes off the wheel of Gert Stigmans And he wins his first stage of the 2013 tour, making it number 24. And as he said in the press conference or in the interview afterwards, it usually takes him till about stage 5 to start winning. And so everybody was happy, all was right with the world again, because Cav had won in a bunch sprint, and he won quite decisively. So that's that.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as the star rating goes, it's a sprint stage, so I'll give it a 2.
Right. So, Tim, you were saying, Tim, statistically that this is I think the 4th time that Cav has opened up his account on stage 5 of the Tour de France.
Yeah, that's right. So, in the 6 years that he's won tour stages, this was indeed the 4th time that he's won his first stage on stage 5, and the other 2 years he's won on stage 2. But winning that stage made him the 6th rider ever, I think, to win a stage in 6 consecutive tours.
Yeah.
Which is a hell of an achievement.
Yeah, it really is. So he was very happy. He was very happy with his lead out. I mean, basically they delivered him 200 meters from the line, and when he's delivered right there in the front, nobody can catch him. So it was vintage Cav. It was great to see his smile, and that took us into stage 6, which was another flat stage that was basically made for a sprint finish into Montpellier. And of course, it's a sprint stage again, so I'll give it a star rating of 2 out of 5. But basically, 32 kilometers from the finish, there was a crash that separated Cav from the rest of his team, and he had to do a ton of work to get back. And I don't know if you guys, I watched it on NBC, and I think they show the same footage everywhere. But the bike handling skills of Mark Cavendish to get back into the main peloton, absolutely incredible. He bunny hops a median. He goes through these small spaces between motorbikes and cars. I couldn't believe the amount of risk he had to take just to get back into the field.
It does sort of make one queasy when one sees that, really.
Yeah. I mean, if I was Peter Todd at home, I just would have been cringing the entire time, just going, oh my gosh. Anyway, so he does all this work to get back, and he gets back, but Andre Greipel's team with the golden shoulders. Oh, if I hear that one more time.
Oh,
anyway.
That's so wrong.
Right. Those guys just basically dominate the last 2 kilometers of the stage, and Greipel takes his first win of the Tour. So now we've had Kittel take a win, we've had Cav take a win, and we've had Greipel take a win. I thought it was pretty unbelievable work by Cav just to get back in, but it was not meant to be a back-to-back win for him. So, Tim, that takes us into some stage 7, which was kind of a rolling medium mountain stage.
Yeah, so it's a Tour de France tour de force, really, by Canada.
Right.
And I've kind of given this a star rating of 4 out of 5, I think. It was one of those races, I think, that actually suffered a little bit from being condensed into highlights. It was one that you had to watch all the way through because there was ongoing tension for so much of the stage. So Cannondale effectively put their entire team on the front to ride what was a 130-kilometre lead out for Sagan. They dropped virtually all the sprinters on the day's toughest climb, which was a category 2, I think. And what, most importantly, having dropped them, they then rode fast enough to never let them back in.
Yeah.
I think the Cavendish group, the Cavendish and Greipel group, got to within 2 minutes at one point, but that was it. Cannondale put the hammer down, and they were never seen again. So as a result, Sagan ate up maximum points both at the intermediate sprint and at the finish. So he won his first stage, and he extended his lead in the green jersey competition to 94 points. And if you look at it, he scored 65 points on that one stage. Greipel, Cavendish and Kittel, between them, scored none.
Yeah, that was unbelievable. And you know what? 2 unbelievable things. One is that Sagan had to win. I mean, with the work that his team did, if he didn't cross the line first, it would have been crickets in that team bus.
But also, he must have been so pissed off by this time because he was always second or third
right.
or whatever, and you know, and he's got his new sort of musketeer look, you know, and he wanted to do, and I was kind of disappointed by his victory salute, I've got to say, although, you know, it was kind of close, so I bet he was just wanting to get over the line, but yeah, he wasn't going to let himself lose it either.
No, he wasn't. And the other amazing thing was that, you know, Tony Martin had made that front group, but he dropped back to the second group to be an engine for Quick-Step. And it was really interesting to see just the battle between the two trains of Quick-Step and Cannondale. And the time gap would start to get a little narrower, and then Cannondale would turn up the engine again and bring it out. But, Quick Step also left a couple of guys in the front group. I mean, Shava was there just to try to, get some points. So they weren't all in, but it was a great battle between two teams that have solely come to the Tour de France for the green jersey. So I loved it. All right. So, Tim, just really quick, do you think this was the day that Peter Sagan clinched the green jersey?
Not absolutely, but I think when all's said and done in Paris, we will look back on it as the day when, he really put everyone to the sword. Has he got the green jersey on yet? No, but he's got one arm in the jersey already.
Yeah, I think it's he definitely took a huge chunk out of what he needs to win the jersey, and he's going to be really hard to beat. Cav will have to basically win the rest of the stages that he can win outright to even make it a competition. So.
Yeah, and of course a big part of the advantage is the fact that Greipel, Kittel and Cav have taken stages off each
Exactly, yeah. All right, so that takes us to Stage 8. And Stage 8 was the first big mountain stage in the Pyrenees with two huge climbs, one over the Col de Peleris, which is, I think, the tallest point in the Tour de France. Yeah. And then, of course, the summit finish on Axe Trois Domaines. So I give this stage a 5 out of 5. It was super exciting to watch from the beginning to the end. So a couple things that happened. We had Christophe Roblon attack, and he had won this stage before. He had won on Axe Trois Domaines before. So I think he was kind of trying to maybe have a repeat performance, but he definitely didn't have the gap that he had before, and he definitely didn't have the legs. It was interesting to see Robert Gesink and Thomas Vogler tried to go up the road as well on that big HC climb, but they weren't going anywhere. And the reason they weren't going anywhere is because Movistar's Nairo Quintana goes to the front and lights it up, and then he attacks everybody and basically passes everybody in his wake, causing Sky to chase like heck. Sky finally chased down Quintana at the bottom of the climb because of a hell of a ride by Peter Kenna. I mean, that was an unbelievable performance by Sky. Those guys worked their tail off to catch Quintana, and they did. So on the final climb up to Axe Trois Domaines, this is where guys are getting shed off left and right, and it really comes down to 5 guys. We have Froome, Port, Valverde, Quintana, and Contador. And then as soon as the pace gets hot, Contador blows up and goes off the back, and Froome attacks, and Quintana is the only one who can go with him for only a brief second, tries to go with him. He blows up. Port passes him, and basically we have Froome coming in to the summit first with Port a minute and 8 seconds behind, and then, 1 minute and 8 seconds in front of Valverde. He's 51 seconds in front of Port, and then he puts like 2 minutes in front of Contador. And guys like Cadel Evans finish like 4 minutes and 13 seconds down on Froome. So it was an incredible stage. So, Tim, is this the stage that we're going to look back on where we say that Chris Froome won the Tour de France? Is the Tour de France decided on the first mountain stage?
No, not at all. And if anything, I think we might look back on today rather than yesterday as being the stage when Froome won the Tour, assuming that he does win the Tour, which is far from certain. I think the surprising thing was that he put as much time as he did into his rivals. I think it was a little bit of a surprise that Contador was as off the pace as he was. And although Axe Trois Domaines is a tricky climb, but it's not that long and it's not overly steep. So to be putting a minute plus into anyone that isn't your teammate with a relatively late attack that was surprising, and psychologically I think it was a huge blow.
Yeah, it was incredible. So, Kathi, what do you think can be done to put time into Chris Froome?
Well, I think today's stage started to answer that in that they've got to isolate him. He's pretty strong. Obviously, we're about to talk about stage 9, but, he held his own. He's smart. Yeah. He's a smart rider. If he finds himself in situations like that, he might have been on the radio the whole time, but, he still knew what he had to do. And then they just have to attack and attack and attack and attack. And again, today we saw a little bit of Contador and Valverde, getting together and deciding how to do that. They needed to do that more They have to
Yeah.
do that more. They have to get Rodriguez in there, and they basically just have to wear him down, and try to take every advantage they can. That's it. I mean, because he's so strong at the moment, and who knows? I mean, he might blow on Ventoux,
Sure. Or he could crash. I mean, there's a lot of things that can still happen. So
there's all kinds of things that can happen that don't have anything to do with them necessarily, but they need to gang up on him, basically.
Yeah, and so if we thought stage 8 was a 5 out of 5, stage 9 was panache-tastic. I mean, it was unbelievable. I didn't get to watch it live, so I came home from church. I watched the DVR, and I was just like mesmerized. I was like, "Oh my gosh, what a great stage!" So, Kathi, give us the rundown.
Well, it was. After Froome's sort of domination of yesterday, everybody's thinking, well, Sky are just going to let a few people go away and they're going to dominate everything and it's just going to be a procession. I've got to say, my heart was a bit heavy this morning thinking, oh man, am I going to have anything to talk about? While I'm tweeting all this. It was another high mountain stage. There were 5 climbs, 4 of which were Cat 1, and the first one was a Cat 2, and that was almost from the off. We had a first break from David Miller and Jack Bauer, and that should have told us what was going to happen. So there were attacks a go-go, basically. But the surprising thing was Froome lost all of his teammates almost immediately. I mean, we're up just a few minutes, maybe half an hour into the stage, and all of a sudden you sit there and think, oh, he's only got Richie Porte. Where'd everybody go? Kennick had sort of gotten pushed into a hedge by somebody.
Right.
And guys were just being shelled off the back. Geraint Thomas, bless his heart, still got a fractured pelvis because that's not going to go away. And he was off the back. Edward Boson Hagen Higgs Hagen-Dazs was nowhere to be seen. So we thought, okay, well, it'll be Porte and Froome. And then Porte just started to go backwards. So I thought what was interesting was that, hey, they showed dominance yesterday, but they paid for it big time today. Anyway, it looked like Contador was actually the mastermind of the attacks because he was kind of going around, buzzing around, telling people to go up the road. There were everybody was all over that parkour from almost the minute it goes. There were like 4 or 5 different groups, and they had all kinds of different people in them. And then
hard to tweet about. It's like trying to describe where everybody is in 140 characters. It's like impossible.
So Movistar were the guys on the front. They were just really, really upping the pace because as soon as they realized that Porte was going backwards, they just put the hammer down because they wanted to make sure that Froome was isolated in order to, be the little zebra that was about to get, taken by the lions. And bizarrely, it looked like Froome just decided, okay, Movistar, well, it's dark sort of kit. I'm just going to use them like I've used my Sky guys. And he just sat in the wheels of those of Movistar. They kept trying to, attack every once in a while. Quintana on the last climb kept going at it, trying to drop him. He wasn't going to be dropped. I've got to say, huge props for that because he could have panicked. I mean, it looked like he was panicking, but he kind of kept it under control. But the thing was, I think Movistar had used up so much energy to drop all the other Sky guys that they just didn't have it in them to attack. Contador, unfortunately, didn't attack either. And then that must have been because he didn't have the legs, because that man lives to attack.
Sure.
But, so, they come in sort of all together, but Dan Martin takes a flyer with Jakob Fulgsang. I can't ever say that name right. And everybody's like, nah, they'll get caught. And then it got to the point where they're, hold on, they're not going to get caught. So they're playing around after the Flamme Rouge, and Dan Martin just picked his moment perfectly. Again, he read the race book, and he knew where he wanted to go, and he took it, and it was a fantastic win for the Sharpies and for him, and I think it was a very popular win as well. So then the other guys come rolling in, and in that group, Cadell Evans, he stayed up with them. Andy Schleck. Yes. Yeah. And you know what? Am I right in thinking that Andy Schleck is now ahead of pretty much a load of people in the GC?
Well, we'll talk about this, but he finished today in front of Alberto Contador.
I mean,
so
he's doing all right. So
it's great. It's great to see him
back. I want everybody to stop making fun of him on Twitter, because actually, if he was a new rider, everybody'd say, "Hey, who's this guy?" You know. So let's stop being so horrible to Andy.
So, Tim, we talked about in our preview show that, if it came down to the Spanish Armada versus Team Sky, that there would be opportunities for teams like Garmin, and we certainly saw that today, didn't we?
Yeah, for sure. And, great move by Martin. I think he realised that he was just far enough down on GC that Froome would let him go. And it was clear as well that not just Contador, but none of them really had the legs or the heart to go after him. And I think from the moment, with about, 7k left, when the gap went back out beyond 30 seconds, when it was him versus Fuglsang, there was only ever going to be one winner.
Yep. All right, and we saw that at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. I mean, he's unbelievable when it's him against another guy. He just knows how to ride. I mean, he came in on Fuglsang's wheel, and he was perfectly positioned for the sprint. So it was game over for Fuglsang. So that is the first 9 days. And if you think about it, the yellow jersey changed 5 times. Kittel wore it, Bakelants wore it, Gerrans wore it. The first South African ever wore it, then Daryl Impey, and then of course we have Chris Froome wearing it now. So I can't remember. Usually, in the Tour de France, it's Fabien Cancellara who wears the yellow jersey for a week, and then it starts to change.
I miss
But that has not been the case in this Tour de France, and it's really been exciting. From day to day, it's like, what's going to happen? And even today, Stage 9 showed, who thought that the entire Sky team was going to get blown to bits except for Chris Froome.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, and importantly today, Vasily Kirienka was the only man to miss the time cut. So Sky are another man down, with Geraint Thomas, who we already know is riding really badly hurt.
Yeah.
So they're running short of numbers.
And Richie Porte came in 15 minutes down. So, I mean, he's lost his podium place big time. I think that was the shocker of the day. I mean, none of it went... It's funny because the only stage that kind of went according to plan was Cav winning in Marseille.
Well, and yesterday's stage, I think, for Sky went according to plan, with Froome dominating by 2 minutes, right?
But I mean, from a spectator's point of view, we certainly didn't think that it was going to go like that.
You're exactly right. From a fan's point of view, nobody could have predicted that he would gain that much time on his rivals,
that he would attack so soon, because even though he's more prone to attack than Wiggins was, everybody thought, it's just going to be the way Sky does things, is just, keep it together and then just drag them down. Whereas I'd said on Twitter that I really didn't care who won this tour, and I really don't.
Right.
I just want it to be a really exciting race, particularly after last year, and and God, Froome's making it that. I mean, it's going to be really. Hopefully, it's going to continue to be exciting.
And Movistar really did themselves a favor today by basically eliminating Port, right? I mean, they would have had 2 guys to worry about going up the road, and now really they only have to worry about wearing down Froome, which is not an easy task and might be even an impossible task. But they really did a great job today of kind of at least putting the ball a little bit back in their court so that they can execute team tactics in the future. Okay, so we could talk all day about these stages because they've been so exciting. Tim, give us kind of just a brief overview of where we stand with the GC, the points, and the King of the Mountains and Young Riders jerseys.
Okay, so let's start with the GC. In the yellow jersey, obviously Chris Froome. We've then got Alejandro Valverde, who is 125 behind. And then behind that, we go a little bit Noah's Ark. So we've got Belkin, 2 of them. So it's 2 by 2. Bauke Mollema and Lawrence Tendam are 3rd and 4th. And then behind them, the Saxo Tinkoff pairing of Roman Kreuziger, who's been one of the revelations of this week, I think, and Alberto Contador. and they're both 151 behind. So yeah, it's a sizable gap, but it's certainly not an insurmountable one. And then beyond that, and it's worth pointing out that Movistar have 3 riders in the top 10. So in addition to Valverde, Quintana is 7th and Rui Costa is 10th. And I think we predicted in our previews on the blog that Movistar had 3 potential top 10 finishes, and that's certainly the way it's turning out at the moment.
Yeah. So how about the green jersey, Tim?
Yep, so green jersey. We have Peter Sagan on 234 points, and then we have some other people.
Right.
I hate to say it's all over bar the shouting, but Greipel is 93 points behind. Cav is 106. In fact, Sagan already has more points at the end of week 1 than Cav managed in the whole of last year. So, that puts into perspective the size of the challenge.
Yeah.
I think we will see things close up next week. I think we've got 3 stages in particular, stages 10, 12, and 13. That are much more traditional bunch sprints. But I think as long as Sagan stays consistent and keeps picking up the points, he will maintain that iron grip on the jersey.
Yeah, and how about the chickenpox jersey?
Yeah. So unfortunately, we're going to start week 2 with the full chickenpox onesie of Pierre Rowan.
God, it's hideous! It's hideous.
Yeah. He regained the lead in the competition today, although he was still wearing the jersey because it was held by Chris Froome yesterday or today.
Yeah.
But he's on 49. Chris Froome's on 33. And then there's a number of riders sort of between 20 and 28 points. It's still very early days in the competition.
Yeah, the Alps will really determine who wins that jersey. Because there's just so many points on offer in the Alps that it's almost hard to tell. I mean, a guy could come out of nowhere really and still win that competition. So
yeah, absolutely. And it may well end up going to one of the GC contenders. We'll just have to see it. But there were 4 big stages coming up which carry the bulk of the remaining points. So there's 15 to Ventoux next Sunday, and then there's the 3 stages in a row in the Alps, 18, 19 and 20, which will be interesting because they're one after the other. You can't have anyone that can ride hard on all 3 days, so tactics and energy management will be really, really important.
All right, and how about our guys who are under 25 going for the white jersey?
So it's the white jersey. No surprise that Quintana is currently leading that, but it's actually quite a good competition. I mean, behind that you've got Mikhail Kwiatkowski, who we've talked about already. Yeah. He's a minute 23 back from Quintana. AG2R's Romain Bardet is 5 minutes back in third. Andrew Talansky from Garmin is 4th. And then beyond that, it starts to get a little bit distant. Thibaut Pinot, who we all remember won the stage last year, he's 5th, but he's 29.5 minutes behind Quintana. So it's looking like a 2-horse race between Quintana and Kwiatkowski at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's really Quintana's to lose, especially when we get into the mountains. So, all right, so that's where we stand. So, what have been our favorite moments so far of this week? I'm going to let you start, Kathi.
Well, besides seeing Cattell walking around like an Argonaut god, because, a girl needs some eye candy during this, and Cancellara was in Austria. I think my favourite stage was the one that Sagan won. I just think that, I don't know, it was just a fantastic show of team single-mindedness, and somebody had sort of said to me, oh, well, you seem to admire that in Cannondale, why don't you admire that in Sky? And I thought, oh, that's a good point. But I did, so there you go. I'm just, I'll be hypocritical, and I know it, but I
it
just
was a
loved
brilliant
it.
stage,
and I loved it. He had to work to get it, and he was going to work. I mean, he's for all the weird stuff that he does sometimes and his being really politically incorrect, he's got a work ethic. He knows what he wants, and he's a monster rider, and I love his mustache.
He's one of the 3 musketeers. All right, Tim, how about you? What was one of your favorite moments this week?
I think for me it would be, we've talked about this already, Jan Bakelants winning on stage 2. I think this was a stage that it had a little bit of everything. It had a result that was in doubt, literally all the way to the line. and as we've said, it was a great reward for a relatively quiet team man. And I don't know if you guys in the US saw the interview that he did with ITV's Ned Bolting here, where it was just, he came across fantastically. He realised the interviewer was British, so he asked if he was going to be made a Sir, just like Bradley Wiggins. And, it was impossible not to be happy for him.
Yeah, that was, the look on his face was priceless. Kathy, I think my favorite moment's kind of along the lines of yours. It's where I've seen awesome teamwork. And, I'll say in Stage 8, watching Team Sky chase down Quintana was amazing. But then, you would think that all those guys would be just so gutted, losing so much time going into Stage 9. But I just love how Movie Star was like, you know what? We're not going out like that.
Yeah.
and just completely turn the race on its head today, with basically putting Port in the red, putting him out of contention. And then you got to love it when teams like Garmin see opportunity in chaos and send a guy like Dan Martin up the road to win. So that was my favorite moment of the week. And I can't wait for what we're going to see in the next coming week, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, Tim, what surprised you this week?
Where do you start? I mean, as we said at the top of the podcast, it's been such a surprising and unpredictable week. I mean, we've had teams doing better than we expected, like Orica-GreenEdge. We've had teams doing worse than expected, like BMC. I'm always a sucker for when a new rider who nobody has really heard of or considered before really makes a breakthrough at the Tour. So again, we've talked about him already, but the big surprise for me has been Mikhail Kwiatkowski.
Yeah,
he's got 4 top 4 finishes. He led home the sprint from the elite group today to take third. He's 13th on GC, second in the white jersey. He would have been a fantastic pick for anyone's fantasy tour team. And yes, I am kicking myself for not picking him.
Well, I thought the first week, other than Stage 8, almost every stage was completely unpredictable. Maybe the one that Cav won wasn't so unpredictable, but I've been really surprised by Contador, Evans, and Andy Schleck. So Contador looks uncomfortable in the mountains. He's not attacking like he normally does, and it's kind of like he hasn't reached his form yet. He's 6th right now on GC, and I'm not sure if I still consider him a podium contender. I don't know, which is strange to see, Alberto Contador in a Grand Tour and not consider him for the podium. But then again, we have to remember the Vuelta last year, so maybe he'll turn it around. Cadell is 16th on GC. I didn't think Cadell would even ever be out of the top 10, and so I was really surprised to see that. Cadell is a genius at staying out of trouble on all these descents and all these tricky stages. He's up at the front, but again in the mountains, he's just been dogged. It's like the Giro effort might have worn him out a little too much. And then the guy that, Tim, you and I laughed at Kathy.
Yes, you mocked me. You mocked me.
We laughed at her when she said, "You know what? I'm going to keep my eye on Andy Schleck because I think maybe he's going to turn himself around." Andy has been riding at the front of these elite groups going up these mountains. He finished great today. He finished right in front of Contador. He kind of looks smiley. He looks, even though his brother just got fired from his team, he looks good. He looks like we could be seeing a resurgence of the Andy Schleck of old. So, Kathy, what has been a surprise for you this week?
Well, obviously, Andy Schleck was no surprise. None whatsoever. The surprise for me was Sky completely falling apart today. I mean, they put in a huge effort yesterday, and you'd think, okay, some of the guys are going to go off the back, but that's all right. He'll still have 3 or 4 around him, and then they'll let the brake go and all this other stuff. But they just it was like they had nothing, nothing in their legs at all today. And the rest day couldn't come sooner for them. Yeah, that was quite the big surprise. The other surprise is that Sagan has only won 1 stage so far. I thought sure he would have been on 3 or something by now. And close. But he's still in the green jersey, and that's that. So yeah. So it's been great. Yeah. It's been a great week, actually. Really, really exciting every stage. Yeah, it has. All right, so let's take a look at
every time we go into one of these Grand Tours, we kind of pick a handful of guys to look at and keep track of and to grade. So, Tim, why don't we start out with with Chris Froome? Obviously, I almost called him Tim Froome.
Oh my God, you're being just like Phil and Paul. Can't figure out whose name it is.
Let's start with Tim Froome. Oh my gosh, Phil and Paul. They said today that Garmin had left Tor Hushoff at home.
Well, they also kept calling Dan Martin. What's his dad's name? Nick or Neil?
Yeah. Something.
On the podium.
I was just like, oh my gosh. Okay, so Tim, tell us about not Tim Froome, but Chris Froome.
Chris Froome. Yeah, I think you have to give him an A. I think his tour almost got off to the most inauspicious of starts when he managed to crash in the rollout before the start of stage 1. But ever since then, he stayed out of trouble. He had a little bit of a flourish at the top of the final climb on stage 2, which won him a lot of friends in the French media. And then I think on stage 8 and on stage 9 today, I think he confirmed what most of us knew, but dared not quite believe, that maybe along with only Vincenzo Nibali, he is now the premier Grand Tour racer in the world. And two hugely contrasting performances. On Saturday was all about power and strength and teamwork. Today was all about him. He made good decisions. He responded to the attacks he needed to. If anything, of all the leading riders, he looked the freshest at the end. On one of the hottest days of the year, he rode like he had ice in his veins. And he I think today potentially did even more damage to his rivals than yesterday. It's not over yet. The template for how you attack Sky is now established, but I think Froome is in a much better position to defend his position in this fashion than Bradley Wiggins would have been last year.
Yeah, Chris Froome is cooler than the other side of the pillow. I mean, he's just a cool dude. So
what a funny phrase.
He's so. I mean, he even when Quintana was attacking him today, he just was like, "Yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
I'm there."
Yeah.
All right, so Kathi, that's Froome. Tell us about what you think of the other bookie's favorite, Alberto Contador.
Well, I am obviously quite disappointed with Alberto. I'm going to give him a C. I was going to give him a worse grade than that, but then, I thought that he was the mastermind behind what happened, early in the stage today, and so that brought his grade up a little bit because he's trying. He just doesn't. He's just not on form. Hopefully next week, he'll be able to ride into form. For next weekend's big Ventoux stage, and then all the Alps and things. I mean, I think we've not seen the last of him, and also, he is an attacking rider. That's what he wants to do. As soon as he has any kind of legs, he's going to go. So. I think we've got a lot to see of him yet, and I, unlike you, Chris, do believe that he will be on the podium.
Well, he is entirely possible, but he's going to have to dig extremely deep to do that. So, and you know what? He's definitely shown that he can do that.
Yeah.
So nothing would surprise me with Contador. It's just I've just been surprised with how his form is right now. I thought he would have come to the Tour a little bit more prepared to do battle. But which brings us to the third guy who really showed, I think, brightly today, which is Alejandro Valverde. I'm giving him a grade of an A- right now. He's stayed safe the entire week. I don't think he was any crashes that I know of. He used his team extremely wisely in both yesterday's stage 8 and today. They were brilliant. And especially on 9, when he realizes, you know what, we got to take Port out of the mix. So everybody go to the front and let's put as much time as we can on Richie Port. And so now he only has to really worry about Froome, which was tactically brilliant. And he's really, for me, the guy who's really the only threat. And I think Chris Froome realizes this too, because he was on Valverde's wheel all day. It's like wherever Valverde goes, that's where I'm going. So I giving him an A-. I thought at the beginning that Valverde might struggle to be on the podium, but I'm not thinking that as much anymore. So good for him. All right, so Tim, that brings us to a guy that I thought would have been much higher in the GC, Cadel Evans.
Yeah, you and me both. I think at best you can give him a C. I think he'd up until yesterday he'd done a pretty decent job. He'd stayed out of trouble. He was noticeably at the front at key moments, so he was ready to respond to things. Lost a bit of time in the team time trial, but nothing too serious. But really, it was yesterday on the climb up to Axe Trois Domaines where he suddenly went from being an experienced hand to just looking like an old man.
Yeah.
He went back so early on that climb. He lost over 4 minutes. There were encouraging signs today. He got dropped early on, but he did manage to claw his way back. But he's 16th now. The podium hopes are gone. But at the same time, I'm a little bit loath to dismiss him. I think you write him off at your peril. If you look in the cycling dictionary under gritty, you'll find a picture of Cadell. No chance for a podium, but don't be surprised if he somehow manages to claw his way back into the top 5 or 6 compounds.
Yeah, I'd love to see him win a stage. To be honest, I think that'd be great. So that brings us to Joaquin Rodriguez, who had his cigar extinguished in stage 8. That guy. So Kathy, give us the lowdown on J-Rod.
Well, I would, except we haven't seen him.
Right.
I mean, I was starting to wonder if he'd even made it to the tour this week. I'm going to give him a D. I would have given him an E, except that he's 9th in the GC. I don't know how. He's just he's stealth these days. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, he's kind of adopted the Dennis Menchoff role, hasn't he?
Yeah.
No,
exactly.
That's Geraint Thomas because he just continually falls off his bike. But yeah, he's I don't know. He's an unknown quantity. I've always kind of thought that the Giro or the Vuelta are more his races anyway because of the steepness of the climbs, and he doesn't really do long grinding climbs. He's not that kind of rider. So I'm hoping something will animate him soon because I really like watching him ride, but he's got a D so far. He's going to have to do better.
Yeah. And that brings us to Richie Porte. I have written on the sheet a B, but I just don't know what grade to give him because I know that he was plan B for Sky, and now he's basically not plan B. But yesterday and the whole first part of the week, he was brilliant. I mean, he was everywhere he needed to be. He's shepherding Chris Froome around. On stage 8, he's the second across the line and put huge time into everybody, and he's sitting second on the podium. And then today he just doesn't have it, and he gets shelled by Movistar. So I don't know what grade to give him. You guys have any thoughts on this? I put a B originally, but I don't know.
I think more of a C.
Yeah, I think it's hard to grade. I think the time he lost today was perhaps a bit artificial because he rode like anything on the front of a group of 6 or 7, I think, where he was the only one doing all the work, desperately trying to catch up to Froome and the others, and he got within 2 minutes and Movistar put the hammer down again and lost him, and I think at that point he got the order to sit up and save his energy. So was he 15-16 minutes worse than everyone else today? Probably not, but yeah, it was just surprising the way he got shelled so easily so early on in the day.
Yeah.
A very interesting little aside to this was yesterday he came out after the stage and said kind of, I don't know what Quintana thought he was doing, blah, blah, blah. Kind of, a little bit of a trash talk, which I thought was just a bit much. And so then today, Movistar, what goes around comes around. I think now, funnily enough, Greg Henderson had put a tweet later on today and just said, karma. I'm not sure who he's talking about. I'm wondering if he's talking about Porte, because there's been a lot of talk about what Porte had said about Quintana yesterday, and then his fall from grace today. So I think it's very interesting because it's all the little mind games, and now that you got Twitter involved, good grief.
All right, so that brings us to the sprinters, and so Tim, I'm going to let you, of course, talk about your man crush, Mark Cavendish.
Yeah, I'll keep this one short and sweet. I think I'd give him a B-. I think he's clearly been affected by the bronchitis that he came into the tour with and the antibiotics that he was on for the first few days. Nonetheless, he'll be a bit disappointed to have missed out both on the opportunity to wear the yellow jersey and by the fact that he's only won one stage. The green jersey chances are gone, but I think in reality, I think all the sprinters knew that they were facing a bit of an uphill battle with Sagan. So, I think it's difficult to grade him on the basis of 1 week. I think there were at least 3 definite sprint stages next week. If he wins one or two of those, he's on track.
Yeah. And then, Kathi, you were following John Degenkolb. What are your thoughts on him? How do you grade him?
I'm going to give him a C. I thought he would have won a stage by now, but he's actually been riding really hard, and he's always so integral to the Argonaut train, and they have really been working for Cattell this week. So I'm going to give him a C.
All right. And then, of course, that brings us to Peter Sagan, who I have got to give an A. I'm not going to give it an A++, because if he would have won those two stages where he got second, then he'd get an A++. I sound like one of these parents that expect their child to be gifted and talented. Peter Sagan is surely gifted and talented. What other grade could you give him besides an A? He's done exactly what he's needed to do and just a little bit more to stay in green. And he's got one stage victory, he's got 2 second places, and that whole Cannondale team strategy on stage 7 was one of the most panache-tastic things I've ever seen. So for me, I think he's just basically sealed the deal for the green jersey, barring any unforeseen mishaps or really, really bad days. All right, so we also decided that we'd look at a couple of people who are kind of our wild card jokers. And so, Tim, you were looking at Sylvain Chavanel.
Yeah, Chavanel. I guess probably a B, I would say, for him. He's actually done a really good job working in the team on the sprint stages to help cover for Cav and to lead him out. But he's also been lively in attacks. He attacked on stage 2, which was his birthday. Also, he was in the attack the following day. Neither of those quite worked out. But he's looked in fairly decent form. And he was 10th, I think, on stage 7. When Sagan won, when he was the one OPQS rider who didn't manage to stay up in the break. But he's done well, but the right set of circumstances hasn't really worked out for him yet.
Yeah. All right, and Kathi, you decided, and we laughed, that you were going to look at Andy Schleck.
Yeah. And you know
so
what?
How do you grade
I'm
it?
going to give him an A.
All right.
Do you know why? Because nobody thought he was going to do anything.
Yeah.
And he's been up there, and he's been riding, like, not quite like old Andy Schleck, but I think he's got it in him. It was interesting because I think it was one of the Velocast guys that said something about it's a wonder what having to renegotiate your contract or something like that will do for a climber. And I thought, well, yeah, because he'd said himself that he wasn't going to be on a team without his brother, so they're fishing around for teams. He's got to show that he's got something in him. So.
Yeah,
I think he deserves an A minus.
I think if he can get just a little better in the Alps, that he could actually crack the top 10 of the GC, which would be huge for Andy Schleck.
Yeah.
And I think he actually could even have the possibility of even winning a stage.
I think he's going to,
which would be incredible.
Mark my words. Now that I'm on a hot streak with Andy, I think he's going to win the one with the Col de Madeleine. Which I think is 19. He's going to win stage 19. You've heard it here. Put your money on him now.
All right. And I, of course, was watching Nairo Quintana. And you got to give this guy an A. And his stage 8 attack was exactly what we wanted to see. And on stage 9, he set the high pace that ultimately eliminated Port from contending the podium. He's currently donning that brilliant white jersey. And for some reason, the white jersey just looks better on guys that are super tan or dark, Latin American skin. He just looks good in it. So I got to give him an A. And he might just be the strongest rider on his team. I mean, I haven't seen Valverde really attack yet, but we've seen Quintana attack over and over and over again. So we'll see. I'm really hoping that Quintana could actually make the podium, but that's probably a long shot.
Oh man, and doesn't he have the whitest teeth?
Yeah.
They're blinding.
He looks great. I'm telling you, style. All right. So that's how we grade the guys when watching. Now we also, every time we do a Grand Tour, we take a look at the domestic teams. And we have 3 that we're looking at. I'm looking at Cofidis, Kathy's looking at Europcar, and Tim's looking at Soja Sun. So I'm just going to cover Cofidis really quick. I give him a D or an E. Remember when Coca-Cola came out with New Coke?
That's what it is.
That's what Cofidis needs to do. They need something. The Coke can team is not, old Coke just isn't working. 8 of their 9 riders crashed in the first week. I've seen a couple of them in the break, but you don't see him anywhere else. Navarro, who was kind of their GC guy, where was he on stage 8? I'll tell you where he was. He was 46th, coming in 9 minutes and 13 seconds after Froome. And Terame was worse, coming in at 9:20. And Navarro didn't really do that much of a better job on stage 9. He finished 10th, or he finished 9th on the stage. But, you know, he wasn't a protagonist. He wasn't an animator. He just kind of sat in the wheel and survived. So, you know, for me, Cofidis, I really think, I know it's kind of traditional that they come to the Tour de France, but I think there's much better domestic teams out there that should have garnered an invitation from ASO rather than Cofidis. So maybe they'll prove me wrong in the next 2 weeks. Kathi, how about Europcar?
I think I can give them a B, actually, although, you know, their grade could be pulled down because of that pox outfit that Pierre Rolland, you know, is wearing. That's just hideous. Anyway, yeah, he's doing very well in King of the Mountains, which is great. And somebody said that he reminds you of a young Andy Schleck in his build and the way he climbs, which is true. Also, there's the 10-year-old Gautier, who just seems to be in all the breaks. And honest to God, he does look about 10 years old. And then, of course, there's Mr. Vogler, who has got a free reign to do whatever he wants. He's sort of the loose cannon of Europcar. And, you know, he goes out in the attack every once in a while. He lolls about with his tongue and, you know, makes everyone happy and gets cheers. So I think, you know, B.
All right. And Tim, how about Soja-san?
I get very similar story to Cofidis. I give them a D or an E as well. I think other than having an all-French team, they've done pretty much nothing to justify their inclusion. The minimum requirement for a wildcard team really is to get noticed. And on that front alone, it's been a fairly epic fail for them so far. They've managed to get a man in the break twice, I think, stage 1 and stage 8, and on both those days the break got swallowed up really early on. They've had a couple of okay results, I guess. Julien Simon has had a 6th and a 9th. He was very briefly 2nd overall. Cyril Lemoine has finished 9th and 11th on a couple of the bunch sprints, and they were a wonderful 18th in the team time trial. So you know, their highest placed rider on GC isn't actually their main GC guy. It's Maxime Mederel, who's 36th.
Wow.
Best part of 21 minutes down. You know, if I was NetApp Endurer, or I am, I'd be watching the tour at home on TV and thinking, do you know what, we'd have done better than that.
Easily. All right, so that's a look at the domestic teams. Okay, so now we're going to allow Kathi to gloat a little bit, because we're going to talk about Fantasy Tour de France. And, you know, every time we do this, there's enthusiastic participation from the people on Twitter, for people who follow us on Facebook, and you know, cycling fans everywhere. I just want to thank the 708 people who joined our league this time around. That is incredible. And I also want to thank Velo Games for making the Velo Voices League a featured league. And there will be prizes, right, Kathi?
There will be. I still don't know what they are.
All right.
Maybe.
So, everybody, thank you so much for supporting us, and thank you for the trash talk. You guys have to be. Most of you are smoking all of us. Kathy's doing pretty well, but the rest of us are pretty abysmal. But anyway, let me cover the top 3 in our league so far. We have Team Diable Noir, and the manager is Dan Jones, and he leads the league right now with 2,153 points. So congratulations, Mr. Jones. We'll see if you can hang on for the next 2 weeks. Then in second place, we have Team More Stars Than Water Carriers, I Hope. And that's managed by James Dunlap, and he has 2,106 points. And then we have Team Nowy Rower by manager Mike Schiller with 1,922 points. So good showing by all those guys. We'll see if they can hang on in the mountains. Our Lantern Rouge is Team Toreros, managed by Irwin with 229 points, which that's pretty pretty abysmal. He must have
had everybody crash out.
Now, let's cover the Velo Voices here really quick.
No, let's
All right. We have Miss Kitty Fondue. She is 281st in the league, so she's in the top half
Not bad,
of 706
not bad.
riders.
More than the top half, isn't it?
Yeah, easily. You have 1,202 points.
Yes.
So congratulations, Kathi.
Thanks to Peter Sagan.
Yes, I've noticed that you have one rider who didn't start the tour.
I know. I'm ahead of all of you guys, and I even picked somebody that wasn't ever going to come to the tour.
Yes, and you also have, unfortunately, Michael Schar today abandoned the tour.
Oh, well.
So, and he had a brilliant first week, though. He was a great helper. All right, I am in second place, and I'm not in the top half of the league. I'm 414th with 1,005 points. My team is built for the mountains, so we'll see what happens. Cherie she is breathing down my neck with 1,000 points. Her magic hat might not be working this tour. I can't tell. So we'll see if she comes back in the mountains as well. But I'm hoping I can fend her off. Now, Ant isn't that far back behind me either. He has 800 points, and he's 561st. And then there's Jack, who's 609th with 728 points. And then
Tim's last.
The ironic thing about this is Tim is our statistician. He is the brains of Velo Voices. If anybody knows what's going on with riders, it's Tim. He is dead last in the Velo Voices at 657th with only 642 points. And I think most of his team has been injured.
Yeah, I think I had 2 of the first 3 riders to abandon. I have a team that's built for a hospital.
So we will see what happens. There's been so much good trash talking. I love when people send me a tweet telling me how bad my team is doing and how good theirs is. I love that. So keep it up, people.
And
it's
I
great
shall
stuff.
tweet you later today.
Yes, you will. I don't think my team did anything great on today's stage, but we'll see. All right, Tim, why don't you give us just a quick rundown of what's happening in the next week?
Okay, so we've just come off the back of, I think, one of the most exciting and unpredictable weeks. Certainly in my memory of the tour. Now, the middle week is, whisper it quietly, a little bit dull. It's really all about a gradual build-up to Sunday's stage, up to the top of Mont Ventoux. So we start after the rest day on Tuesday with stage 10. That's a nice gentle leg stretcher of a sprinter's stage up to St Malo on the coast of Brittany. That gets us into position for the first of the 2 individual time trials. That's a pretty flat 33-kilometre route with a picture postcard finish at Mont Saint-Michel, which is France's second most popular tourist attraction after the Eiffel Tower. We then have a series of transition stages that gets the peloton basically from one side of France to the other in 3 days. Stage 12 gets us as far as Tours, where we will almost certainly get a bunch of sprints. Stage 13 is almost as flat, but it has a nasty little kick up in the last 10k and then a twisty finish. But it should still be a day for the sprinters. And then Saturday, stage 14 has 7 categorised climbs, all Cat 3 or 4, so nothing individually that hard, but collectively it will feel like one of the spring classics, especially coming as it does towards the end of the week and with Ventoux to come. This is a day that has breakaway written all over it, I think.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also the last remotely flat stage until Paris. So it might just come down to a battle of wills between the stage hunters and the sprinters teams. And given the fact that it's as lumpy as it is, it might also be another opportunity for Cannondale to set up Sagan. And there is every chance that the green jersey will be all but decided on this stage. So that then sets us up for Sunday, stage 15, to the lonely, isolated summit of the Giant of Provence. 21 kilometres of sheer and desolate hell. And sadistically, it's also the longest stage of this year's race. It's 242.5 kilometres. There's a couple of minor hills on the way, but basically the peloton will spend the entire day riding in a straight line due south, watching as Ventoux looms ever larger on the horizon. Now, the race probably won't be won here, but the list of contenders for the yellow jersey will be whittled right down to 3 or 4.
Yep. All right, so Kathi, speaking of contenders, at the end of after the Ventoux stage, what do you think the top 3 look like on GC?
Well, I think Chris Froome will still be in yellow.
Okay.
I think Contador is going to come back up, and he's going to be second by the end of Ventoux. And I might just go wild and say Andy Schleck is 3.
Wow.
Just because I don't know what else to say. So
well, hey, you know what? If you say it, it might happen. So,
yeah, I could be Andy Schleck's good luck charm. Who knows?
I thought you were going to say Elo Kaiser for 3rd.
Yes. He's going to come, and he's going to do it. It's going to be great.
All right. So, Tim, what do you think?
I think actually there aren't really that many opportunities for riders to gain significant chunks of time next week, other than the individual time trial and of course Ventoux. I can see Contador moving up, but I'm actually going to say that the GC is going to look pretty much as it does now, with maybe Chris Froome eking out a little bit more time in the time trial. But even if at the top of Ventoux he's 2 to 2.5 minutes ahead, the race isn't over. Not with that final 3 stages, 18, 19, and 20 to come.
All right, and I'm going to say I agree with you. Froome's going to maintain his first place position. I think Valverde is also going to maintain his second place position. But I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that Alberto Contador ends up in 3rd position by attacking and winning the Ventoux stage. So that's what I'm going with. All right, so that is what's coming up in the next week, and it's going to be awesome. All right, so another thing that's happening next week is I'm going to France.
Yay!
Woohoo! I'm headed to Marseille on Friday, and I'll be driving up to Provence, and I'm going to be riding Mont Ventoux the morning of Bastille Day when the riders are coming. So I'll ride up it, I'll descend down the other side, and then I'll watch the riders as they start the ascent.
I was going to say, are the riders going to pass you on the way up?
No, I'm going to be getting up very early to ride it, and it's going to be I'm going to be extremely tired. So I do Ventoux, and then on Monday I drive to the Alps and I ride the Col du Galibier and the Telegraph on Monday. Then Tuesday I ride the Col du Madeleine and the Col du Glandon. And then Wednesday I ride Alpe d'Huez.
Oh my God.
So basically in the space of 4 days I will have ridden 6 HC climbs. So I'm going to be really tired. But Thursday I will sit on some switchback on Alpe d'Huez, and I will be wearing my mankini. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to be wearing the mankini, but I will be on Alpe d'Huez cheering on the riders as they come by. So that'll be awesome. And then Saturday I'll be in Paris. Yay! And I'll be meeting Kathi and Ant. Yay! For the first time in person. Yay! And then we will be watching the finale together on Sunday. And we will also be having a party on Saturday night. Everybody is welcome to join us. We don't know the location yet, but we will find out in the next week or so.
Yep.
And Kathi will be publicizing it on Velo Voices on Twitter and Facebook, and maybe we'll even post a little note up on the blog on where the party is going to be. It's going to be real casual. We don't have any money, so bring money for drinks.
Yeah, exactly. When we say party, we mean we'll tell you where you can meet us, and that'll be great, won't it? And then
yeah. But it's going to be awesome, and it'll be a great opportunity to meet a bunch of you who are going to be in Paris. Again, everybody's invited. Don't feel shy. Just come meet us. It'll be outstanding.
I was thinking of getting those little name tag things. Hello, my name is, and you have to put your Twitter handle, because that's of course how everybody knows everybody.
Absolutely, that's what we should do.
And I'll bring my purple Sharpie to do it.
Excellent. All right. Well, that is us for tonight. Just let me remind you, make sure you follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/VeloVoices. Of course, make sure you follow us on Twitter, because we have race updates going on all the time this week and next week at Velo Voices. And, of course, we have so much content right now on the blog for the Tour de France at velovoices.com. Tim and Kathi, it was great to be with you tonight. It'll just be you two next week, as I will be probably nursing myself or in the fetal position in a bed while you're doing the podcast, trying to recover. But have fun next week, and I'll talk to you, Kathi, in Paris.
Yay!
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Velo Voices. Many voices. One passion. Pro cycling. For fans. By fans.